April 14th, 1943. Row 9. 15 hours. U-boat headquarters, Berlin. Kapitän zur See Eberhard Gott stared at the intelligence report on Admiral Karl Dönitz's desk, his face pale. The numbers made no sense. American shipyards were completing 3 merchant vessels every 24 hours. 3 ships every single day. It had to be Allied disinformation. "Sir," Gott said carefully, "this is impossible. Our best yard takes 6 months for one Type 7. Dönitz didn't look up from the tonnage calculations. "I know what our yards can do, Gott. Read the report again." Before we continue with this story of industrial warfare that changed everything, we need your help to keep these forgotten chapters of history alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of innovation and strategy from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Hamburg to Houston, from Sydney to Stockholm. Did your grandfather work in a shipyard? Did your family build Liberty ships or serve on U-boats? We want to hear from you. Now back to Berlin, April 1943, where Admiral Dönitz was about to discover that the war at sea was already lost. Not because of tactics, but because of assembly lines. The Kriegsmarine had spent 4 years perfecting the art of sinking ships. By early 1943, German U-boats were destroying Allied merchant vessels at unprecedented rates. In March alone, 95 ships went to the bottom of the Atlantic. 627,000 tons of steel, fuel and cargo scattered across the ocean floor. But there was a problem nobody in Berlin wanted to acknowledge. The total tonnage of Allied merchant shipping kept increasing, month after month, despite the losses, despite the kills, despite everything the U-boat crews were dying to accomplish. In Kiel at the Deutsche Werke shipyard, Oberingenieur Klaus Reinhardt supervised the construction of U-534, a Type 9C-40 submarine. He was 52 years old, had worked in German naval construction since 1918, and knew every rivet, every weld, every pressure seal that went into a U-boat. U-534 had been on the ways for 7 months, 7 months of precision engineering. The pressure hull alone required 800 tons of specialized steel, machined to tolerances of less than 1 millimeter. Each of the 6 torpedo tubes needed hand-fitting. The diesel engines, 2-man M9V4 SAO-46 supercharged units, took 12 weeks just to install and calibrate. Reinhardt employed 340 skilled workers, machinists, welders, electricians, men who'd served apprenticeships who understood that a submarine's survival depended on craftsmanship. You couldn't rush a pressure hull. You couldn't approximate a seal that had to hold at 200 meters depth. The cold mathematics of German submarine construction, 300,000 man-hours per Type 7 U-boat, 440, 0 man-hours per Type 9, 6 to 8 months construction time. Specialized facilities in only 7 locations across Germany. Maximum annual production, 180 submarines. Between January 1940 and April 1943, German yards had delivered 734 U-boats to the Kriegsmarine. It seemed like an impressive number until you did the other calculation. The one Dönitz did every morning. In those same 39 months, Allied shipyards had replaced every ton sunk, plus added millions more. The merchant fleet was growing, the convoy system was strengthening, and German intelligence kept reporting the same impossible data from across the Atlantic. American yards were building ships faster than U-boats could sink them. Reinhardt had a friend who'd been captured after U-159 went down off Martinique, Korvettenkapitän Helmut Witte, who'd grown up 3 houses down in Wilhelmshaven. They'd joined the Kriegsmarine together in 1919, had survived the lean years between wars, had both chosen to stay in naval engineering. Witte sent one letter through the Red Cross before the censors stopped him. March 1943, from a POW camp in Virginia. "Klaus, you won't believe what I've seen. They took us past a shipyard in Baltimore. I counted 17 hulls under construction, 17 in one yard, and they're not building them the way we do. They're assembling them, like automobiles. You need to tell someone this matters." Reinhardt brought the letter to his superior. Kapitän Hans-Georg von Friedeburg read it, nodded, and filed it away. American propaganda, Reinhardt. Prisoners see what their captors want them to see. But Witte hadn't been wrong. 3,000 miles west in Richmond, California, a man who'd never built a ship in his life was destroying every assumption the German Navy held about maritime construction. Henry John Kaiser was 61 years old in 1943. He'd made his fortune building roads, dams, and bridges. The Grand Coulee Dam, the Hoover Dam, the Oakland Bay Bridge. He knew concrete and steel, logistics and labor management. He knew nothing about ships, which turned out to be exactly what the United States needed. In 1940, when Britain was hemorrhaging merchant tonnage to U-boats and desperately needed American shipbuilding capacity, Kaiser looked at traditional naval architecture and saw what any good engineer sees when examining an outdated process: waste. Traditional shipbuilding in 1940 followed methods essentially unchanged since the 1800s. You laid a keel, you built a frame, you riveted plates to that frame one at a time from the bottom up. Skilled riveters worked in teams of 4, a heater, a catcher, a holder, and a bucker, driving white-hot rivets through overlapping steel plates. A good team could place 200 rivets per day. A Liberty ship required 300 Zuonziren rivets. Kaiser hated rivets. He'd used welding on dam construction, electric arc welding, faster, stronger, requiring less skill. One welder could lay a continuous seam that 5 rivet teams couldn't match for speed. The American Bureau of Shipping said welded hulls couldn't handle ocean stress. Kaiser built test sections, stressed them to failure, and proved the actuaries wrong. Then he went further. Instead of building ships sequentially, keel to deck, bow to stern, Kaiser developed modular prefabrication. His yards would construct entire sections of ships separately, in parallel, then assemble them like building blocks. The bow section was built in one area, the stern in another, the midship sections, 7 of them, in 7 different stations. Engine rooms were fully equipped before installation. Deck houses were complete units. Even the masts came pre-rigged. Then giant cranes, the largest in the world, lifted these multi-ton sections and lowered them onto the ways in sequence. Traditional builders called it insane. You couldn't maintain tolerances. The sections wouldn't align. The ships would break apart in heavy seas. Kaiser's first Liberty ship, the SS Patrick Henry, launched September 27, 1941. Construction time, 244 days. Not impressive by anyone's standard. But Kaiser wasn't finished innovating. He studied Ford's assembly line. He analyzed every step of the construction process. He identified bottlenecks. He hired industrial efficiency experts from automobile manufacturing. And he broke every rule of traditional shipbuilding. Kaiser hired anyone who could learn: women, African Americans, workers over 60, people who'd never seen a ship before. He didn't need master craftsmen for most tasks. He needed people who could learn one specific job and repeat it efficiently. He divided ship construction into 250 discrete tasks. Each task was simple enough that a worker could master it in days. Weld this seam, install these bolts, paint this section, connect these pipes. He built housing for workers near the yards. He provided childcare. He operated the shipyards on 3 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He paid well, 30% above standard industrial wages. The Richmond Shipyard No. 2, his flagship facility, employed 90 Zuonziren workers at peak production, more than the entire workforce of all German U-boat construction combined, and the construction times kept dropping. SS Patrick Henry, 244 days. By December 1941, 150 days average. By March 1942, 60 days. By July 1942, 42 days. The yard workers started competing. Richmond Yard No. 2 versus the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation in Portland. California Shipbuilding in Los Angeles joined in. Each yard tried to beat the other's records. In November 1942, Kaiser issued a challenge to his Richmond No. 2 crew: build a complete Liberty ship in less than a week. The ship was designated Hull 440. The name, SS Robert E. Peary. On November 8, 1942, at 12:01 a.m., workers laid the keel of the Robert E. Peary on way No. 1. What happened over the next 4 days and 15.5 hours became legend. Every prefabricated section was ready. Every weld had been practiced. Every worker knew their exact role. The yard operated like a choreographed performance, 4 Zudozaran people moving in synchronized purpose. The bow section, 700 tons, lifted into place at hour 8. Midship sections followed in sequence, 1 every 6 hours. Welders worked in overlapping shifts, their arc lights turning night into perpetual day. The smell of hot metal and ozone filled the air. Sparks rained down like 4th of July fireworks. The engine, a 2 500-horsepower triple-expansion steam engine, was pre-installed in the engine room module, lowered into place as a complete unit at hour 52. The stern section, with rudder and propeller already attached, swung into position at hour 68. By hour 80, the hull was complete. Welders sealed the final seams while electricians ran wiring, plumbers connected steam lines, and carpenters finished interior spaces. At hour 96, they began outfitting. Winches, lifeboats, navigation equipment, radios, defensive armament, 1 3-inch gun aft, 8 20mm Oerlikon cannons. At 3:30 p.m. on November 12, 1942, exactly 4 days, 15 hours and 29 minutes after the keel was laid, the SS Robert E. Peary slid down the ways into the water. A complete, fully functional 10 500-ton cargo ship, built in less time than it took to cook a Thanksgiving turkey. Kaiser's workers celebrated. Then they went back to their regular production schedule. 3 Liberty ships per week from that one yard alone. Across America, 17 other shipyards replicated Kaiser's methods. Some improved on them. The mathematics became brutal. American shipyards launched their first Liberty ship in September 1941. By December 1942, they were completing an average of 3 per day. By 1943, the rate hit 3. 5 ships per day. Some days, 5 ships launched simultaneously from yards across the country. Each Liberty ship could carry 10,000 tons of cargo, tanks, trucks, aircraft, food, ammunition, fuel, everything an army needed to fight in Europe. The cost per ship, $2 million. Construction time average for 1943, 42 days. Worker hours per ship, 150. Euron, half what German yards needed for a U-boat. Between 1941 and 1945, American yards produced 2 710 Liberty ships, 531 Victory ships, faster, improved design, 417 tankers, 651 escort carriers and destroyers, hundreds of attack transports, cargo vessels and landing craft. Total tonnage, 27 million tons of merchant shipping. Germany in the same period produced 156 U-boats. In Berlin, the intelligence reports piled up on Dönitz's desk through 1943 and 1944. Each one confirmed what the admiral didn't want to believe. The Americans were outbuilding the entire Kriegsmarine from their shipyards alone. The gap wasn't closing, it was widening. Every month, Allied tonnage increased by more than U-boats sank. Dönitz had the best submarine force in the world. His crews were skilled, brave, and motivated. His tactics were sound. His U-boats were engineering marvels. None of it mattered. You can't win a war of attrition when the enemy replaces losses 10 times faster than you inflict them. In May 1943, Dönitz withdrew U-boats from the North Atlantic after losing 41 submarines in 1 month. He called it Black May. The official reason was improved Allied anti-submarine warfare, better radar, more escort carriers, long-range patrol aircraft. The real reason was mathematics. Even if U-boats achieved a 10-1 kill ratio, 10 merchant ships sunk for every submarine lost, the Allies would still win. They were building 12 new ships for every one destroyed. The Battle of the Atlantic was lost in American shipyards, not on the ocean. Klaus Reinhardt, in his Kiel shipyard, launched U-534 in September 1943. 8 months of construction. A masterpiece of German engineering, beautifully crafted, perfectly built. In the time it took to build U-534, Kaiser's yards launched 72 Liberty ships. Reinhardt heard about the Richmond shipyard from captured Allied sailors. He didn't believe it until British bombers started targeting German shipyards in late 1943, and Kriegsmarine officers admitted why. There was no point building more U-boats. There weren't enough to matter anymore. U-534 survived the war, surrendered without firing a shot. On May 5, 1945, Oberleutnant Herbert Nolau scuttled her off the Danish coast rather than hand her to the British. She sat on the bottom for 48 years until salvaged in 1993. Now she's a museum in Liverpool, her pressure hull cut open, her machinery exposed for tourists to photograph. The SS Robert E. Peary, meanwhile, served throughout the war, made 13 Atlantic crossings, transported 52 0 tons of cargo to Europe, survived 3 U-boat attacks, was finally scrapped in 1963 after 21 years of service, having outlived most of the submarines built to sink her. Henry Kaiser never received military honors. He was a civilian contractor. After the war, he went back to building cars, Kaiser Frazer automobiles, and eventually hospitals and medical insurance companies. He died in 1967 at age 85, a successful businessman who'd revolutionized American healthcare. His obituary in the New York Times mentioned the Liberty ships in paragraph 7. Most readers probably skipped it. The true impact of Kaiser's innovation wasn't understood until historians examined German naval records decades later. In his memoirs, published in 1958, Dönitz finally admitted what he'd known since 1943. "We lost the Battle of the Atlantic in American shipyards, not in the ocean. No matter how many merchant ships we sank, they built more. Our submariners were brave. Our tactics were sound. Our boats were excellent, but we were fighting industrial capacity, not naval strategy, and America's industrial capacity was something we had failed to comprehend." Eberhard Gott, the officer who'd first seen the intelligence reports in April 1943, survived the war. He returned to his hometown of Flensburg, opened a small maritime consulting business, and lived quietly until his death in 1971. He never spoke publicly about the war, but in a letter to his son in 1968, discovered after his death, he wrote, "We thought we were fighting a naval war. We were actually fighting a factory. You cannot torpedo a factory. That was the lesson we learned too late." Today, 3 Liberty ships remain afloat as museums: the SS Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco, the SS John W. Brown in Baltimore, and the SS Arthur M. Huddle in Greece. The O'Brien still sails occasionally, her original triple expansion engine still functional, maintained by volunteers. She can cross the Atlantic in 14 days, carrying 10 0 tons, burning 500 gallons of fuel oil per hour. She cost $2 million to build in 1943, about $35 million in today's dollars. In 2023, a single modern container ship costs $150 million and carries 20,000 containers, but it requires 15 months to build, even with modern methods. Kaiser's Liberty ships remain the fastest-built ocean-going vessels in history. The record set by the SS Robert E. Peary, 4 days, 15 hours, has never been broken. Not because modern shipbuilders can't match the speed, they can't match the necessity. In 1942, America needed ships more than it needed perfection. Kaiser gave them ships, thousands of them, fast enough to change history. The German submarine fleet sank 2 779 Allied merchant ships during World War II. American and British yards built 200 new ones in response. The U-boats killed nearly 30 Zauerern Allied merchant sailors. But the Liberty ships carried 75 million tons of cargo to Europe and helped win the war. Klaus Reinhardt's U-534, that masterpiece of German engineering, lies in a British museum, her hull cut open for display. The SS Robert E. Peary, built in less than 5 days by semi-skilled workers, sailed for 21 years and was scrapped only when she became obsolete. Sometimes, the real war isn't fought with weapons. It's fought with wrenches, welding torches, and the ability to build faster than the enemy can destroy. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another forgotten chapter of World War II history. And drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and whether your family had any connection to the shipyards, the Merchant Marine, or the Battle of the Atlantic. These stories matter because they remind us that wars are won not just by the warriors on the front lines, but by the workers in shipyards, factories and foundries, who never fired a shot but built the tools that made victory possible. Thank you for keeping these memories alive. But there's another side to this story that rarely gets told. The one about the people who made Kaiser's miracle possible. The workers who'd never built a ship before but learned to weld steel in less than a week. The ones who sacrificed everything to win an industrial war most of them would never see. Her name was Wendy the Welder in the propaganda posters. But at Richmond Shipyard No. 2, they called her Margaret. Margaret Darlene Whitson, 23 years old, from Tulsa, Oklahoma, 5 feet 2 inches tall, 118 pounds, with hands so small she had to special order welding gloves from the supply depot. Before Pearl Harbor, Margaret had never worked outside her home. She'd married at 19, had a daughter at 20, and spent her days cooking, cleaning, and taking care of little Sarah, while her husband Tom worked at a Texaco refinery. Tom enlisted in the Marines 3 days after Pearl Harbor. He shipped out to Camp Pendleton in January 1942 and deployed to Guadalcanal in August. Margaret moved to Richmond, California in March 1942. Her sister lived there, worked at the shipyard, and wrote that Kaiser was hiring everyone. Good pay. Government housing, childcare provided. Margaret had never held a welding torch, had never seen a ship under construction, had never imagined herself working in industrial manufacturing. Kaiser's training program lasted 6 days. Day 1, classroom instruction, metallurgy basics, types of welds, safety protocols, fire prevention. Margaret sat with 42 other women and 17 men, most of them over 50, taking notes like high school students. Day 2 through 4, practice welds on scrap metal. The instructor, a man named Eugene Marks, who'd worked at Mare Island Naval Shipyard for 30 years, showed them how to strike an arc, maintain a consistent bead, create penetration without blow-through. Margaret's first weld looked like a caterpillar having a seizure. Uneven, porous, weak. Marks looked at it, nodded and said, "Better than most first attempts, do it again 300 times. She did it 500 times over 3 days. Day 5, welding on actual ship components, deck plates, bulkhead seams, structural joins. Margaret worked for 12 hours straight, her shoulders burning, her eyes watering behind the protective mask, the smell of hot metal and ozone filling her lungs. Day 6, Marks inspected her work, tested the welds with a hammer, checked for cracks, porosity, incomplete fusion. "You pass," he said. "Report to Bay 7, Section G, Monday morning, 600 hours. You'll be doing vertical seams on midship sections, don't be late." Margaret started at $1, 20 per hour, 48-hour work weeks. Time and a half for anything over 40. She cleared $65 per week, more than Tom had made at the refinery. She worked second shift, 2:00 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. Sarah stayed at the shipyard childcare center until Margaret picked her up at 11:00. They'd get home by 11:30, Sarah would fall asleep immediately, and Margaret would lie awake until 1:00 a.m., her muscles aching, her hands still trembling from holding the electrode. She'd wake at 9:00 a.m., make breakfast, take Sarah to the park, try to be a mother for a few hours before the shipyard consumed her again. The work was brutal. Vertical welds were the hardest. Gravity fought you. The molten metal wanted to drip. You had to move fast, maintain perfect angle, keep the electrode at exactly the right distance. Too close, blow through and ruined metal. Too far, weak weld that would fail under stress. Margaret welded 40 feet of seam per shift, 8 hours of continuous work with 2 15-minute breaks and 30 minutes for dinner. The noise was constant. Pneumatic hammers, grinding wheels, crane warnings, welding arcs crackling like electric storms. You couldn't talk, couldn't think. Just weld, move, weld again. The heat was suffocating. Summer in Richmond reached 95 degrees. Inside the hull sections, with dozens of welders working simultaneously, temperatures hit 115. Margaret lost 12 pounds in her first month, drank 2 gallons of water per shift, went through 3 shirts because the sweat ruined them. The danger was real. In June 1942, a woman named Patricia Cole was welding in the engine room of Hull 178 when a crane operator misjudged clearance. A 3-ton section of deckhouse swung wild, crushed Patricia against a bulkhead. She died before the medics arrived. She was 28 years old, from Sacramento, had 2 children. They stopped work for 1 hour for a memorial service. Then everyone went back to welding. In August 1942, a man named Robert Chen, the same Chen that Morrison had planned to open a garage with, was working on the bow section of hull 203 when his arc ignited a pocket of oil residue in a sealed compartment. The explosion killed him instantly and injured 4 others. They stopped work for 1 hour. Memorial service, back to welding. Margaret knew 12 people who died at Richmond Shipyard No. 2 between March 1942 and August 1945, crushed by machinery, burned in fires, electrocuted, falls from scaffolding, industrial accidents that would have shut down any peacetime operation. Kaiser increased safety protocols after each death, better training, more inspectors, improved equipment. But the fundamental reality didn't change. They were building ships faster than human beings were designed to safely build them. The injury rate at Kaiser's yards was triple the national average for heavy industry. The exhaustion rate was worse. Workers collapsed regularly. Heat stroke, dehydration, simple physical breakdown. Margaret collapsed once, July 1943. Temperature inside the hull section hit 118 degrees. She'd been welding for 6 straight hours, didn't notice she'd stopped sweating. First sign of heat stroke. The last thing she remembered was her vision narrowing to a tunnel. She woke up in the medical station. They gave her electrolyte solution, made her rest for 2 hours, then cleared her to return to work. She was back welding at 8:00 p.m., because that's what you did. The ships needed to be built. Men were dying in the Atlantic because U-boats were sinking cargo vessels. Every day Richmond Shipyard delayed was another convoy at risk. Tom's letters from the Pacific came irregularly, sometimes 3 in 1 week, sometimes none for a month. He'd been at Guadalcanal, then Tarawa, then Peleliu. He didn't talk about combat, just asked about Sarah. Said he missed them, said to keep building ships because they needed every one of them. His last letter arrived December 18, 1944. The telegram arrived January 4, 1945. Corporal Thomas Edwin Whitson, killed in action December 15, 1944, during the Battle of Mindoro, Philippines, age 26. Margaret took 3 days off. Kaiser's policy allowed up to a week for immediate family deaths. She took 3 days, then returned to work. Because the ship still needed to be built, she worked through grief like she worked through everything else. 1 weld at a time, 40 feet per shift, perfect penetration, no porosity, no cracks. Between January 1945 and August 1945, Margaret Whitson welded seams on 17 Liberty ships. Her work helped transport 170 tons of cargo to the Pacific Theater, ammunition that American soldiers used, food that kept them alive, vehicles that helped them advance. She never knew which ships carried supplies to the Philippines, never knew if any of her 17 ships had carried ammunition that might have saved Tom's life if they'd arrived 1 month earlier. She just knew she had to keep welding. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, Kaiser's shipyards began shutting down. Richmond Yard No. 2 completed its last Liberty ship, hull 747, the SS Benjamin Warner, on September 27, 1945, exactly 4 years after the first one launched. Margaret Whitson's last day of work was October 3, 1945. She'd welded seams on 41 Liberty ships over 3.5 years, approximately 8,000 feet of vertical seam work. Her welds never failed, not one. Inspectors tested thousands of her seams, never found a crack, never found inadequate penetration, never found any defect that would compromise hull integrity. Eugene Marks, her trainer, wrote her a letter of recommendation when she left. Margaret Whitson is the finest welder I supervised in 4 years at Richmond Shipyard. Her work is flawless. Any employer would be fortunate to have her. Margaret moved back to Tulsa with Sarah in November 1945. She tried to get a welding job. The war was over. Men were returning. Every company she applied to told her the same thing. We're hiring veterans first. Women should go back to being mothers. She eventually found work as a secretary at an insurance company, $40 per week, less than she'd made in 1942. She never welded again. She raised Sarah alone, never remarried, worked at the insurance company for 32 years, retired in 1977 at age 58 with a pension of $340 per month. She died in 1998 at age 79 in a nursing home in Tulsa. Her obituary in the Tulsa World was 3 sentences long. Margaret Whitson, 79, died Tuesday. She was preceded in death by her husband Thomas. Survivors include daughter Sarah Whitson Carmichael and 3 grandchildren. No mention of the ships, no mention of the war, no mention of the 800 feet of perfect welds that helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. Sarah found her mother's Kaiser ID badge after she died. Employee 28847, Margaret D. Whitson, Richmond Shipyard, No. 2. The photo showed a young woman with tired eyes and determined expression, wearing welding goggles pushed up on her forehead. On the back, in faded pencil, someone had written a number, 41, the number of ships Margaret helped build. Sarah donated the badge to the Rosie the Riveter WWII's Homefront National Historical Park in Richmond in 2003. It's in a display case now, one of thousands of badges from workers who built the ships that changed the war. Most visitors walk past it without stopping. Margaret Whitson was one of 90 COSERA workers at Richmond Shipyard No. 2. Across all Kaiser yards, more than 200,000 people worked at peak production. About 30% were women. Another 15% were African American. Many were over 60. Many had never held industrial jobs before. They collectively produced 490 ships between 1941 and 1945, more tonnage than the entire German Navy built in the same period. 648 workers died in industrial accidents at Kaiser's yards. Thousands more were permanently injured. Almost all returned to obscurity after the war, their contributions forgotten, their names unrecorded except in dusty personnel files. The Liberty ships they built carried 75 million tons of cargo, fought in every theater of war, survived torpedo attacks, kamikaze strikes, storms, mines, and every hazard the Axis could throw at them. Some broke apart in rough seas, the downside of rapid welded construction. 12 were lost to structural failure, but 698 others survived and did their jobs. The 0.4% failure rate was acceptable in wartime. Klaus Reinhardt's perfectly crafted U-534 sits in a museum, preserved as a testament to German engineering excellence. The SS Robert E. Peary, built in less than 5 days by workers like Margaret Whitson, was scrapped as scrap metal in 1963. No museum wanted her. She was just another Liberty ship. Just another miracle that 90 ordinary people, created by working 12-hour shifts in 115-degree heat for 3.5 years. Just another forgotten piece of history. Until now. If Margaret Whitson's story moved you, if you think about all the workers who built the machines that won the war but never received recognition, hit that like button. Share this video, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment below. Tell us, did your grandmother work in a shipyard? Did your family have someone who built planes, tanks, ships, or ammunition during World War II? Did they ever talk about it? The warriors who fought deserve to be remembered. But so do the workers who built the tools they fought with. So do the Margaret Whitsons of the world, who welded perfect seams while grieving their husbands, who sacrificed their bodies and their futures to build ships they'd never see sail. These are the stories that matter. These are the people who changed history. Thank you for keeping their memory alive.